Nice detailing on the landscape. Feels like there's a whole world just waiting for us to kill and loot it.
That's right! Welcome to my Wonderlands!
Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, released in 2022, is a spin-off of the Borderlands series and a sort of sequel to the DLC Assault on Dragon's Keep for Borderlands 2. If you played any of the Borderlands games, Wonderlands will instantly feel familiar to you. It's Borderlands wearing a fantasy skin, a first-person shooter with tons of loot set in a Dungeons & Dragons type world. So, what's the too long didn't watch on Tiny Tina's Wonderlands? It's a fantastic game. As a fan of Borderlands, it hits all the marks when it comes to combat, gameplay, and story. I played it on the PlayStation 5 on performance mode and didn't have a single FPS drop or bug. The combat is just as engaging as any of the other entries into the series, although I would have liked it if they had leaned more into the fantasy elements, maybe include melee or magic builds that didn't just feel like an extension to the gunplay. Borderlands is known for its loot, and I'm happy to say there is a ton of it in Wonderlands. You will be picking up strange and interesting guns, shields, and magical rings and spells throughout your playthrough, customizing your character and outfitting them in a manner that feels good for your playstyle. You would think that with gameplay as good as Wonderlands, they might have skimped on the story and setting, but that couldn't be further from the truth. The story is good, with old characters making a reappearance and new, memorable introductions to join you on your journey. I was also incredibly pleased with the side content. There are so many side quests to do in these large and varied maps that, if you strictly followed the main story, you may not have even seen. So, is Tiny Tina's Wonderlands worth checking out in 2024? Absolutely it is. In my 30-hour playthrough, where I did most of the side content, along with a tiny bit of the post-game, it was well worth the time I put into it and the price I paid. It's on PlayStation, Xbox, and PC, and since it is a few years old, you can get it pretty cheap, for around $20. I would recommend you pick it up if you like Borderlands, or you want a fun shooter.
It's a gun!
Hardly a fine weapon. But in the hands of a champion, anything can bring glory.
Wait, there's guns in fantasy?
You're in Tina's fantasy, baby!
Let's delve a little bit deeper into the graphics and technical side of Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. From the technical side, it runs really well. Stable frame rate on performance mode with nearly non-existent loading times when playing it on the PlayStation 5. You can fast travel nearly instantly, or respawn after dying without waiting around and reading tip screens. Graphically, Wonderlands is good. The cartoony, cel-shaded graphics of Borderlands makes a return here. It's really good at hiding any bad textures in order to maintain the high frame rate. Just be aware that some of the skyboxes can be hit or miss with how good they look. Overall, it does look fine, but some of the bigger set pieces are really cool. The world will shift and change depending on the narration by Tina. So you all of a sudden could find yourself surrounded by a bunch of pirate ships, along with an army that's hurling fireballs and burning the city down around you. But the character models are stiff, so expect a lot of people of just standing and talking to you or repeating the same actions over and over again. The UI, something that I don't often mention for a lot of games, was really easy to read and the inventory screen is pretty alright. But I will say that it is frustrating that you can easily sell your equipped items by accident to the vending machines. And even though you can buy them back, there are times when you don't realize you sold that gun that you like, and you're long past that point, so you don't want to turn around and go back to rebuy it. Wonderlands has an overworld map where you'll travel around to different sections in search of side quests or new maps to explore. This is one of the most unique things about this game, since they lean heavily into the tabletop role-playing mechanics. Areas could be blocked off by a cheese puff or a river of cola from a spilled can. A bridge can be an eraser that Tina has placed there to give you a shortcut. It's great, and I enjoyed traversing these sections, although it's more of an advanced level selection screen than an actual gameplay area. The maps you enter are all unique and creative, and all of them have an element of a fantasy adventure, whether it's a classic dungeon diving against the undead, fighting pirates on a sandy beach, or goblins on the mountaintops. Each are well crafted, although you may get turned around and lost if you don't check your map for directions.
Hold on, what game are we playing here?
We're playing Bunkers and Badasses, baby!
And I, Tiny Tina, am the Bunker Master. So what I say goes!
The voice acting is going to be a point of no return for some players. You can be on board with the story and the gameplay, but if you find the character dialogue annoying at the start, it doesn't really get any better or change. This isn't the same as Borderlands 3, where it felt like the writers were trying way too hard to write cool dialogue for the kids. This is much closer to Borderlands 2, but while there are some highlights and big names like Wanda Sykes and Andy Samberg in the cast, it never reaches the same consistent highs as Borderlands 2. Will Arnett, Lego Batman himself, is the main villain in this story, but unfortunately he isn't Handsome Jack. No one can be, and while he's pretty good, I mean they all are, I bet a large portion of people who play this game will not like the dialogue, especially Tiny Tina. She can be a bit much at times. She's good as a side character in bits and pieces, well paced throughout a story, but when you put her front and center, the flaws unfortunately begin to show. The dialogue for me never reached a level where I wanted to mute it or turn the game off, but there was a few moments that hit a nerve and I almost reached for the remote.
Tasty! Now, prepare to enter a world of fantasy!
I don't see anything.
You gotta imagine it, knucklehead.
Just close your eyes and wonder.
Wonderlands' story is self-contained and has nothing to do with the main Borderlands franchise. If you haven't played any of the Borderlands games before, that's completely fine. You won't really be lost. The story is simple. Tiny Tina is hosting a game of Bunkers and Badasses, which is their version of Dungeons & Dragons. You play as the newbie, one of the people on this ship that crash landed near Tiny Tina's place, and you're playing the game with her while you wait for the ship to be repaired. Joining you is Valentine, who's voiced by Andy Samberg, and Fret, voiced by Wanda Sykes. Newbie isn't a silent protagonist. You can choose their appearance and their voice, with the in-universe explanation that you're designing your Bunkers and Badasses character, and when you speak, you need to roleplay. Like a good Dungeons & Dragons campaign, Wonderlands takes you across a vast world, hunting down an evil dragon lord. I don't want to spoil too much of the story, but there's some really heartfelt and memorable moments, joined by a lot of hilarious ones as well. The main story, if you do rush it, should take you about 15 to 20 hours to complete, but it's the side content where Wonderland shines. I encourage you to do every single one of the golden exclamation marks you find in the maps or on the overworld. Some of them are long, sprawling side adventures where you may climb a beanstalk that climbs into the sky and has destroyed an entire village, or help a pirate that's been wrongly accused of being evil by his fellow pirates. There are entire maps, some even larger than the main story maps, that are attached to side content alone. The beanstalk map, for example, is massive and contains a bunch of other side missions within it. And here's the thing, if you didn't happen to pick up this magical bean on the overworld, something you didn't strictly have to do, you would have missed this entire section. Some of the side content can be pretty basic, but even those have interesting characters and dialogue. Not once in the dozens of side quests that I picked up did I ever regret doing them. Although the story may feel like it has these high, world-shaking stakes, you are constantly reminded that the entire adventure is just a game. Tina may have changed things in the middle of a quest because the players aren't paying attention to what's happening around them, or they're fixated on something inconsequential. It's just like you took a real game of Dungeons & Dragons and put yourself into it. I've had times where a carefully crafted quest went totally off the rails, and it's great to see it recreated here. So, even though you are chasing down a Dragon Lord hell-bent on destroying the world, it's also fun to help Claptrap get Excalibur or the Tooth Fairy to meet her quota.
The hour is nigh, adventurer! We're flying up! Nothing the kingdom! You come!
That is not how magic missiles work!
But what about the whales? I care about nature!
Gameplay in Tiny Tina's Wonderlands is a classic first-person looter-shooter that I remember and loved from Borderlands. The combat is simple, fun, and engaging, where you're going to use a variety of weapons like shotguns and sniper rifles, SMGs, and assault rifles to mow down waves of enemies. To go along with it, your character will have skills or magic spells depending on what class you selected and the items you have equipped. I chose the Spellomancer, a class that excels in hurling equipped magics and allowing an additional spell to be slotted instead of a skill. I spent the game throwing out magic between firing my guns and reloading. Unfortunately, it did turn my character into a bit of a glass cannon, and until I spec'd it correctly with health and shield regeneration, I died quite a bit. If you happen to discover a weakness in your class like I did, you do have the option to select a second class to add to it. although you max your character out at level 40, meaning you're going to need to be strategic in how you split your skill points. There are 6 classes to choose from, 7 if you own the DLC, and they all have their own strengths and weaknesses and style of gameplay. But let's talk about the guns and the loot. These weapons aren't as fantasy-esque as I would have liked. Borderlands has been known for its good gunplay, matched with often strange and zany unique weapons with crazy effects. Wonderlands has that for sure, but they don't lean into the fantasy as much as I would have liked. For example, a shotgun is still clearly a shotgun, except the bullets it fires are now magical waves fueled by crystals. A pistol could be a pirate's flintlock or a hand crossbow, but functionally they're still going to be the same type of guns that you would have played in the Borderlands series, just with a fantasy veneer over them. This is where I wish they would have dived headfirst into the fantasy gameplay. I couldn't help thinking about what Wonderlands could have been if they made it even more of a Dungeons & Dragons type adventure. Instead of melee attacks being relegated to pressing the right analog stick, maybe you could have actually have gotten a sword and a shield. Maybe you could have done just a full magic build with no guns at all. Don't get me wrong, it's still fun, but I was haunted by the possibilities of what this game could have been if they didn't just merely stick a fantasy skin on a Borderlands game. Instead, what would it have been like if they had made a fantasy game and just put Borderlands mechanics into it?
Okay, we unlocked the cheese curl.
As you put the key into the lock, the powerful ancient meteor begins to rise from the ground. Woo! Returning to the heavens from whence it came.
You're really not going to admit you dropped that on accident, are you?
I have no idea what you mean.
Tiny Tina's Wonderlands will run you anywhere from 20 to 30 hours, depending on how much of the side content you engage with. I would thoroughly recommend you do all the side quests, since they can be as enjoyable as the main story. You can pick up Wonderlands for Xbox, PlayStation, or PC through Steam for about $20 on sale, and it's worth every penny. Sure, some of the jokes and banter can be hit or miss, but I found they landed enough for me to be laughing at it. There's also enough post-game content to keep you playing if you strive to max out your character and look for the perfect loadout. Playing alone or with friends, Wonderlands is a perfect game to pop into your console and have a fun adventure of bunkers and badasses. Like always, I want to thank you for watching my videos, and make sure to like and subscribe for more content.
And the prow aim to destiny. You have begun your journey across... Oops, no, it sank.